Hello, this is Jonathan Lampel here with Blender HD, and in this part 2 tutorial of creating fire in Blender, I'm going to be going over the materials and textures you need and the rendering setups to go ahead and make realistic fire. So in part 1 we already went over the settings for the domain and the settings for the flow objects, and went over how to create a little bit different types of fires. And if you missed that and want to watch it, just go back and watch part 1 first, and then you'll be all caught up to speed. The only thing I did change is in this video I set the divisions to 96 and high resolution to 3, baked it, and that's literally the only thing I changed. I just chose a frame that looked nice to render, and that's all set. So now let's go ahead and just make the material. So make sure you are in Blender Render, otherwise if you're in Cycles it's not going to work at all. And one common thing I've seen a lot is people have their whole fire simulation set up, they press F12, and there is nothing there. Well, there's two reasons for that. One, because in this scene I have no lamp. And the reason for that is because since this is going to be fire, it's going to be emitting its own light, and I don't need a lamp to be, reflecting off anything, because I don't need any light. The second reason is because we don't have the smoke material or the fire material applied to this domain. So it's really easy to set up, and I'll just show you how to do that here real quick. So I'm going to add a new material, change this to volume, and because we want our texture to define the density of the domain, I'm going to turn the material density all the way down to 0. Alright, so now I can go ahead in the textures panel, create a new texture, and choose voxel data. And what this does is it takes the voxel information from the smoke simulator and plugs it into a texture that we can now map to the domain object and render out the smoke. So you have to set the domain object here. So remember, cube is our domain object, so we choose cube. And even if you render it out now, you won't see anything, and that's because the source is smoke, and this simulation is not set to emit any smoke, it's fire only. So you have to change this from smoke to flame. And one thing that I found is that linear sometimes looks bad, so I just like to change it to quadratic. It gives a little smoother result, and I just like to use it better. So if you're ever getting kind of choppy effects, change that to quadratic, it might help a lot. And then lastly, under the mapping, make sure map to bounds is selected, otherwise you might have some trouble with adaptive domain, I've found. So just make sure that's checked, and we should be good to go. One thing you need to do is make sure that you have these three things checked. This one is the density, so this just means that this texture is going to influence the density of the material. This means it's going to change how much the material is emitting light, and this is going to influence the color of the light that's emitted. So now if we go ahead and render it out, we see we have a purple flame, and it's kind of all dotty in there. And the reason for that is because this is our color that we've set to affect the emission, and we can change that to yellow or whatever, but it still doesn't look that good. For a few reasons. One, because fire isn't really all one color, and second, because we have all those spots in there. So an easy way to get rid of those spots is just go down here under the step size, and I'm going to change this to 0.05, and that way it'll just smooth it out. It'll take a little bit longer to render, but it looks a lot better. And now we can go ahead and start making the material, or the texture. So what I'm going to do to really make this fire look good is I'm going to use a color ramp, and color ramps override the color that we have down here in the influence. So instead of using purple or yellow or whatever we have, it's going to use this color ramp. And there's a lot of different people like to use a lot of different color ramps, like setups, but I found one that works really well for realistic fire and cartoon fire, all in the same color ramp, and it's really easy to adjust, and it's definitely saved me some time, so I will go ahead and share it with you now. So I'm going to take this white one, and I'm going to move it over just a little bit to about right there. Doesn't have to be exact, just kind of move it over, and I'm going to change the opacity to 0.5, or the alpha to 0.5. And then I'm going to add another one, and I'm going to move it back here all the way to the end, or sorry, not all the way to the end. I'm going to turn the alpha to 0, make sure that it's white, and I'm going to move it pretty close next to that white one right there. Then I'm going to add a new, I don't even know what you called that, new ramp thing, I don't know. And I'm going to make this one a little bit beige. And this one I'm going to set to 0.5 opacity. Add another one. I can move that one about there, and I'm going to set this one to an orangish color, getting more towards the tip of the flame. Add a new one and make this one kind of a darker red, again with 0.5 alpha. Make sure that's 0.5. Alright, so now we're all set. So basically this is going to be where the texture is most dense, and this is going to be where it's least dense. So when I render this out, you'll see what's going on is down here where we have all of our main density, it's going to be slightly clear. And the reason for this is if you look at a picture of real fire, where it's coming off the logs or whatever, it's not going to be solid. You're going to have these kind of streaks, and it's not going to immediately burst into solid flame. You're going to have this kind of heat wave effect going on, and it looks really cool, so I like to add it here in the color ramp to make it look more realistic, and it definitely helps. And then the reason why it's clear over here is because that's, you know, the rest of the domain. We don't want, if we had this set to something, then it would just get a fuzzy cube, and we don't want that. So make sure that's set to 0 opacity. And since we set these to, you know, half the opacity, you're going to get a little bit more depth because you can see through the fire a little bit. So you won't just be getting one side, you'll be getting the detail of the other side as well. A little bit, so that really helps it make the fire pop a little bit more. But you can see that since it's set to a lower opacity, it's kind of dull. And there's two ways to change that. You could increase the density scale here, or we could go into the influence and change the emission values. And the density scale is going to make it look more thick. So I'm just going to go ahead and change the emission value, and I'll change this to 5 and see what that looks like. Alright, that looks pretty good. And really that's the basics of it. You can tweak the color ramp. Maybe you want more, you know, more orange color down in there. Maybe you want a variety of red. I don't know. Just change it to your liking. Maybe I'll make that like a solid red right there. Make kind of a burnt red over there. I don't know. I won't take too much time tweaking. Just make it however you like. And the really cool thing about this is, remember I said you can use it for a lot of different effects, a lot of different styles. So not only does this work for a realistic fire, which would be intensity 1 here, is you can change this value to completely alter the how it looks. Because what it's doing is, this is basically the intensity of the of the voxels, and so when you set this to a lower value, it's kind of making it less contrasty. I don't really know how to explain it, but I'll just show you and give you an example because I don't really know how to say that, but you can just see for yourself. If I set that to 0.75 and render it out, we're not going to get this transparent look. We're going to get a more flat, gradual flame here, and it's just changed the intensity. I honestly don't know how to explain it, but I think just showing you will be good enough. If I change it to another, say 1.5, it's also going to completely change it, because you can see that we now have these lines inside of here where the transparent part of the texture is now reaching up all the way through here. And you can set this to, you know, ridiculous extremes if you want. and you can get a really nice stylized sort of look. So you can go all the way from, you know, realistic, stylized to cartoony, um, all in one little setting here. And you know, sometimes with larger values, it makes it look like larger fire. Smaller values look like smaller fire. Just change it to whatever you like, whatever you think looks best. And I really do think it adds quite a lot to the look. And yeah, that's about it. So you might think, oh well, we're done rendering, then that must mean we're done with the image. But you can see it doesn't really look all that realistic, and a lot of people stop here. They, you know, render it out, and what it looks like is what it looks like. But that's definitely not the best way to do it. The best way is to go take this image and use compositing to really enhance it. So I'm going to bring the step size down a little bit so we can have a better picture. And let's jump into the compositor and let me show you what a drastic change it makes, because we already have the base materials and colors necessary to make a good image, but it's just not quite there yet and needs a little bit of help. So I'm going to change to the node editor, change this from materials to compositing nodes, hit use nodes, and backdrop. And now if I just press Control Shift and click on this render layer, it's automatically going to add a viewer node and bringing it into the backdrop there. So now I can play with this and see it coming real time. And if I press Shift Space, it's going to maximize that viewport so I don't have the rest of this distracting me. And so I can go ahead and start tweaking. So the first thing that I generally do is I'm going to add an RGB curves node. So I can press Shift A, color RGB curves. And I'm going to add a little bit of an S curve. And what an S curve does is it makes the brighter places a little bit more bright and the darker places a little bit more dark. So you can see it looks like it's adding a bit of contrast, and you can make it look, you know, more stylized if you'd like, or whatever. I just try to find a good medium that looks fairly realistic. You can go for whatever kind of style you want, but just tweaking the brights and tweaking the darks, you can get completely different results, and all from the same render. So I think that looks about right. Next I'm going to go ahead and add a color hue saturation value node, and I'm going to up the saturation just a little bit. 1.2, I think that looks good. Again, you can tweak that to be whatever you'd like, but maybe 1.1, that's a bit too saturated. But that just helps bring out the color in the flame just a bit. And another thing that you can use that is really nice for fire is gamma, which does a similar thing to the S curve. You can play with it if you want. Setting it higher gives you more of the contrasty feel, and if you set that lower, like 0.5, you're going to get a more flat type of feel. I'm not going to use it here, but it's very useful sometimes, so just be aware that it's there and you can use it. So, alright, lastly I'm going to add a filter glare node. So what I can do is set the threshold to say 0.3, and now you can see we have these kind of streaks going on, but I don't really want streaks out. Oh, excuse me. I want this to be glowing, so I can choose fog glow instead of streaks. And now we have a nice little glow going on, and you can set the threshold to be whatever you'd like. Just be aware that it kind of has that little nasty edge, so I like to make it a little bit higher, and you can change the quality to whatever you'd like. Set the size higher. Whatever, that just gives it a nice little glow, so it's not just flat. And you can plug that in there. And really, we could spend quite a lot of time going in and tweaking all these different settings and, you know, making it look absolutely perfect. I did spend a little bit of time on my preview image that you probably saw as you started the video. In the compositor, just tweaking a couple things and making it look a lot more realistic. But yeah, just definitely remember that there's a huge difference between our initial render, which looks flat, boring, and uninteresting, but we have all of the basic ingredients necessary for a nice final image. So there you have it, the basics of rendering fire inside of Blender. I hope that you learned something, and if you did, then definitely feel free to like the video. If you didn't learn anything, then I'm not going to be offended if you dislike the video. And if you want more tutorials, feel free to subscribe. If you got any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I'll try to get back to you. So thanks for watching, and have a great day.